Welcome to ETHDam, to ETHDam, to ETHDam, to ETHDam, to ETHDam.
So, I'm Jacob. I'm the DevRel at Phylax Systems, and today I'll talk a little bit about how we try to fix security so that crypto can win. So who are we? We're a small team dedicated to solving security so crypto can win. Most of us have been around in this space for a long time. We've gone through hacks, we've been hacked, we've seen it all. Decided finally to try to see if we can actually do some improvements on all of this. So what are we building? We are building the Phylax credible layer, which enables dApps to define states that they don't want their protocols to reach. And by that, it means like you don't have to worry about the edge cases that can lead to this, basically. So an example would be you define, you could have a safe proxy, just a small example that's fairly relevant, I think. And you can define that you never want the implementation address to change. So that's something you can write in a rule. And if this rule will be broken by a transaction, the transaction that results in that would be ignored, basically, by the block builder. I'll go into more details, but this is like just to give you an idea of what you can do. So why should you care about security? Basically, since 2024, at the beginning of 2024, $3.5 billion have been lost to hacks of all kinds. We see more and more hacks. They're not as big as they used to be, with a small exception of the Bybit or safe front-end hack, which also made this number a fair bit bigger than it was a couple months ago. Audits in itself are often one-off and are very expensive. And as soon as you change your code just a little bit, you should basically get a new audit. So it adds up and gets very expensive over time. Formal verification is difficult. It's like few people who can really do it, and you often have to learn a new language for the formal verification. So it's not something that anyone can just sit down and do. And perfect code also doesn't exist. Like I think most of you, or all of you, probably agree with this, or have seen code that you thought was perfect, and anyway, it got hacked somehow. So yeah. Basically, we looked at all this and thought, what can we do to change this? Where it doesn't have to be super expensive and difficult to improve security of your smart contracts. And that's how we came up with the credible layer. So in the credible layer, you define what a hack looks like, as I mentioned earlier. So you basically can think of it a little bit like a reverse intent. You write a rule, say, I never want to allow a position in my lending protocol to be underwater, for example. So if there is a transaction that results in it going underwater for some reason, this transaction would be reverted. This is already a pretty powerful concept. We do actual hack prevention. So there are a lot of tools out there that allow you to do mitigation. So they can say, okay, there was a hack. This protocol has now been drained or whatever, and now we execute a transaction on behalf of this protocol, pausing the protocol. Or there are even protocols that would do front running on your behalf. So if they see that there's a transaction that would hack your protocol, they would front run and do the hack themselves, so to speak, and then pay back the funds. But it still means that the protocol was hacked, and it doesn't look good for the user that their funds were actually lost for a period of time until the funds were returned. So you really want to have hack prevention and not mitigation. Our solution is currently on L2s because it's much easier to build what we're building if you can use already centralized sequences. So we kind of rely on the trust that people already have in these centralized sequences. How it works a little bit more in depth is that for each new block, we fork the state of the chain, run all the incoming transactions against the state of the chain, and then we see if any of the transactions violate any of these rules. And if there is a transaction that does this, we ignore this transaction and it won't be included by the builder. So basically, how do we do this? We do it with what we call assertions. Assertions are written in Solidity, and we use like a small library called the credible STD. And there's basically no context switching or obscure languages needed. You can just like write it in Solidity. It's pretty much in the same way as you write tests in Foundry. We have some additional cheat codes that allow you, for example, to iterate through all calls in the call stack. So you can say, okay, I want all changes to this storage slot in the entire call stack, which can be useful for price manipulation or detecting price manipulation attacks, for example. You can compare states pre and post state, pre and post execution. You can get all call inputs. I'll show you a little bit more about the cheat codes later. As I mentioned, you define what a hack looks like, so something you never want to happen. And additionally, something I think is very important is that these assertions are deployed independently. So it's not, you don't need to have them written as part of your smart contracts. You can add them after the fact. So for example, you deploy your contracts, your protocol, and you find out, oh, there's actually a small like bug or a small edge case that you could get into. You can deploy an assertion to cover this specific edge case, and you don't have to redeploy your entire protocol, for example. And you can also remove these assertions later on if you find out that they're not necessary or something like that. But it's a very powerful concept that you can do this in like a modular kind of a way. And it also means that all the protocols you already have deployed can add assertions to them. So how it works, I explained a little bit before. Basically, you have all the transactions coming in, the sequencer builder look at all these and run the rules against the unfinalized transactions and only include the transactions that pass the rule set, basically. So it's fairly simple. Do you actually have a timer somewhere? Okay, but I don't know when I started. So anyway, so another concept I think that is getting more traction at the moment is invariants for your protocol. This was a couple months ago by Trail of Bits that they wrote, like why invariant-driven development is a powerful thing to do. It's a very, very good exercise to do for any smart contract developer. Sit down, define the invariants for your protocol. If nothing else, then you'll probably find out what is like the important things to like keep an eye out for in your protocol. But I found out when I started looking into this more that there are quite a lot of projects that, at least not publicly, have their invariants defined. So I think that's definitely something that's worth looking into. And as late as yesterday, I saw a discussion on Twitter with like Consta from Reth and Daniel from ExtraFi. They were also talking about like how important invariants are, but it's very difficult to actually define them in a good and precise way. But anyway, you should do this, and it's quite convenient to implement your invariants in assertions to make sure that they're always true for your protocol. And as I mentioned with cheat codes, you can actually do some of this which you cannot do in regular Solidity, as you will see very soon. So what does the credible layer consist of? We have the credible standard library that you use for writing assertions and writing tests for these assertions. So we have the PCL, which is our command line tool that allows you to authenticate for the DApp, and you use it for running the test, and you use it for storing and submitting assertions. And then we have the DApp, which allows you to create projects for your assertions, as well as linking assertions to a smart contract that you're monitoring or that is part of your project. And only the owner or some otherwise defined admin of a contract can actually add assertions to it. That's a very important small detail. Otherwise, you could just break different protocols easily. And the last one is we are also building what we call a transparency dashboard. So you can go and see all the projects that actually have assertions defined. And that way you can quickly get an idea of how secure is a specific protocol before you put your life savings into it, as an example. So we try to build this to make it more like transparent which projects have like good assertions defined, etc. Then a little bit about the different cheat codes we have. So you can basically load any specific data at a given storage slot, which is quite nice. So you could easily read private variables, stuff like that. We have the state management, as I talked about earlier, where you can both fork pre and post state, which allows you to compare values before and after a transaction. We have transaction data, so you can get all the logs. That can be very nice for rebuilding, I don't know, let's say you're doing a lot of deposits into different positions in a protocol, but you also keep track of the full balance. So that's a mapping, and it's also just a value. But you can then use the logs, for example, to reconstruct this and make sure that the total balance increases by the total sum of the deposits, which is very nice to make sure that your invariant, or one of your invariants, for example, is always true. Then you can get all the call inputs in the call stack. So, for example, you can get all the calls to update price in a price oracle, and you can see, okay, is there a call in the stack that really deviates a lot from like all the other prices? This could mean that maybe there's a price manipulation attack going on, or some kind of flash loan attack. You can also get all state changes to a specific storage slot. So that could work in the same way as for the, like, it could work for the price manipulation attack. It could also be, for example, as I mentioned earlier, someone could change an owner or an admin of a contract, do some stuff and change it back to the initial admin, and it would look like nothing happened. But if you look through all the state changes, you could see that it actually changed intra-transaction to someone that like it shouldn't be, and then changed back. So you can catch these kind of things that you have no way of really catching in regular Solidity just with your require statements or whatever. And lastly, we have call triggers or triggers, which you use to define when an assertion should be run. So this is also very powerful. You can, for example, say, anytime this storage slot changes, we run the assertion, or anytime there's a specific call to a specific function, we run an assertion, or if an ETH balance changes of a specific contract, then we run an assertion. So you can be pretty granular about when you run it, and combining the triggers with the cheat code, you can really find some interesting things to trigger your assertions on. Two small examples. This is like one way that a hack that happened back in 2023 could have been prevented by basically running a health check on all updates to positions or accounts for like, yeah, I don't want to go too much into detail with it, but basically making sure that anytime there is an update to an account or a position, that this position is still healthy. If you run this in your entire protocol, it doesn't matter if you add new functionality or something like that and forget to add a health check to that. It will always check that all positions are healthy. So you can kind of upgrade your protocol with like a peace of mind, and we like to say devs will sleep better at night as well. And here's an example of what it would look like if you wanted to do intra-transaction price deviation. So you get all the state changes of like a token price feed. You take the value of the token price feed before the transaction, so that's the fork pre-state, and then you take fork post-state and you compare like all the state changes with like here I have deviation of 10%, and if any of the price changes inside of the call stack were more than 10%, we would not allow this transaction to go through. So this is a way to detect and prevent price manipulation attacks. Yeah, so where are we at with this at the moment? We are currently deploying this weekend our first demo. So that will be like a closed demo. People can reach out and they can get to try it out. We're also helping the first projects that are willing to try this out. We do like white glove onboarding, writing some assertions for them, helping them along the way. And yeah, if you're interested to get a full demo or see how this works, come find me after or shoot me a message on Twitter or whatever. I think that's all for me. Here's like a little bit of info. Did I do it on time?
No, you're good. You're good.
Do I have time for questions or just,
Yeah, you have time for questions.
Are there any?
Yes. First, any questions?
Okay, so I didn't really understand who is like running these assertions. Is like a sidecar for like people running nodes.
So the assertions would be run like we have to integrate with the sequence, like at the sequencer level. So basically, let's say I don't know. Right now we do OP stack, so it would be base or whatever. They would have to actually implement our software at their sequencer block builder level. So that's also a challenge, but that's what we need to do to improve security, kind of. Yeah.
Cool, thanks.
Are there any other questions?
So, what if like someone write a assertion that actually preventing the normal functionality of another DApp, right?
Yeah. So you mean like if you accidentally write an assertion that has an error in it, or like that?
No code is perfect, right? So.
Yeah, like false positives. Yeah. So that's cool. Like that's one of the things why it's nice that it's kind of modular, so you can disable it. And we also usually would say, run it for like you can add it and run it, but not enforce it. So for example, you can let it run for some time and see if it has any false positives, without actually enforcing this. And you can also do back testing. So you can add it and then you can run it on like the last 10,000 transactions to your protocol and see if any false positives would pop up there. Yeah, but you need to test it, of course, very well, but you have the chance to remove it again if it turns out that you made a implementation error and it's doing false positives.
So okay, if I understand correctly, so if one sequencer adopts this technology, it's still up to the protocol themselves to write the assertion. It's not like, for example, if it's not up for base code developer to decide what the assertion will be. It will still be up for like RV developer to write the assertion.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's up to the protocols to define their rules and use this as a tool to increase or improve security.
So if I'm a code dev in MakerDAO, I cannot write the assertion for RV or Chainlink.
Exactly, you can write them, but you cannot add them to their protocol. It's only we have some different ways of doing it, but like either the deployer, not the deployer, but like it would be like the owner of a, like if you have like an admin or an owner defined in your smart contract, then it would be this account that is allowed to activate them.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Last question.
What would you say to those protocols like Base that are worried about the centralization aspect that this could bring?
I mean, then I would say that like Base themselves, they're basically already running a centralized sequencer, right? So we are just kind of piggybacking on the trust assumption that already exists, that the sequencers will not censor or they will not like allow people to like, they will not block transactions or they will not do weird stuff, right? So that's the thing right now with sequencers. Like we can basically point out and say this is the legal entity running this sequencer, and if a hacker then colludes with the sequencer, in theory they could go around an assertion, but that would have severe consequences for the company that is running the sequencer, which would be Base in this case, and we could like basically sue them for not like doing their job, so to speak. So that's how we currently look at it. We would of course love to find a more like decentralized way of doing this in the future, but it also increases the complexity quite a lot, which is why we focus on these centralized sequencers to start with.
Gotcha. Thank you.